Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who is a cynic, and on today's episode, I'm going to be doing some more math for you guys. So, I hate doing math still, but I think that we need to do some to really figure out what's actually going on with Solo and how much money it's actually going to make. So, this is something where a bunch of people have been leaving a lot of comments about this, saying you're not considering the fact that Solo is not going to be making all of the box office totals that the movie is making, and that's absolutely true. And so I wanted to break down what films actually make and also what companies actually make overall when it comes to actual profits themselves. So first, I'm going to look at this is a 2015 article from Forbes, talking about how the most profitable studio in 2014 was Walt Disney, which is probably the same situation now, especially with all the money they're making from Marvel and everything else that they're doing. So in 2014, it made a total of $7.2 billion. Now that's in total revenue. That's the amount of money it made on the box office totals. That's the money that it made on all sales, everything put together, $7.2 billion, which is a lot. However, it only made a net gain, meaning that it only made a profit of $1.7 billion. So that is a lot less than $7.2 billion. Now, it is still a lot of money, but it's not nearly as much as 7.2. And so when you break that down, what you end up seeing is that means that out of that total $7.2 billion, it only made 24.6% of its total gross. So out of all the money that it made in 2014, it only made 24.6% of that $7.2 billion. Now, why do I mention that? Because again, when it comes to the movies, they don't make 100% of all box office earnings. So that again was from Forbes.com. So now to bring this over back specifically to movie studios and what movie studios actually make. This is an article from theweek.com which really breaks things down. So when it comes to the movie studio section, it says arrangements vary, but the movie studio usually ends up with about 60% of proceeds from American box office. Overseas, the number is usually less, anywhere from 20 to 40%, depending on the film distribution arrangements, agreements, and other costs associated with foreign distribution, not to mention piracy. So when we look at studios and how they made money originally, usually if it's a very big property, so for example, a Solo or a Marvel film, usually the take in that first week is about 90%. But the way things work is that they make a large percentage that first weekend, but then they make incrementally less as the weeks go on. Again, it really depends on the arrangement that they make with the actual movie distributor like AMC or Regal or any of those groups. And so when they make those deals, they determine how much of the take they're actually getting. Now, again, when it's a big movie, usually they'll take roughly 80-90% of the total gross of that film. But when you actually break things down over the long run, in all, so again, this is according to theweek.com, which I think is being very fair here, says in aggregate across all films and all times, 60% is a reasonable estimate for the total amount of gross that a movie will make. So that means that when you hear films making $1 billion, that does not mean that they're making $1 billion in profit. What it means is that they're only getting about 60% of that. So they're only getting 60% of that before you take into account any other costs that the overall film might actually cost. Because again, it's not just the overall production budget, it's also what they owe in marketing, because they spend a crap ton of money, especially nowadays. They spend so much money on marketing. Also, sometimes the actors make certain deals where they get a percentage of the box office take, so they lose money there as well. And so when we look at these numbers then, I did some more math for you guys. And so when you do the numbers then, if the 2014 numbers from the Forbes article were to be believed, let's say this is a minimum. So let's say this is the least amount of money that the film's going to make. Now, it's not going to make this small amount of money. I'm just saying that right now. But let's say that let's just say, for example, let's say that this film caps out at $500 million, which is what I think this film is going to cap out on. Again, it barely made over $100 million this weekend when you even count the whole worldwide totals. So the film making $500 million is not very likely at this point. Now, I could be wrong on that, but there's really just no evidence to support that this movie is going to make that much money. So let's say on the low end, Disney only makes about 24.6% of that. That means that out of the $500 million, it would only make $123 million of profit. Or rather, $123 million total, and that's before you take into account any other costs that they actually have to put into it. So again, that's assuming that it makes $500 million, which is roughly about the amount of money that it took to make the film and market the film. But again, that is not really being being totally totally straightforward there, because there are just so many other costs that come into making an actual film. So if it only makes $123 million, that is a net loss of over $350 million that they would have had on this film. So that again would be on the extreme low end. So let's be a bit more fair. So let's say on the high end, let's say it makes 80% of the total box office gross, which again is 20% higher than what most people would say is what a movie will tend to bring in. So that means that if it were to take 80% of $500 million, then it would only make $400 million off of that. It would only receive $400 million from the box office gross, which is $100 million less than the budget and the marketing likely put together, but does not take into account any other sources, any other costs that the film production might have actually taken place with. So that means that it's going to be roughly $100 million loss. That's assuming that it makes $500 million, which again, a lot of questions about that. And if it takes 80%, which is being extremely generous. Now let's be a little bit more realistic. So instead of going to 60%, let's just be fair and say, okay, let's say that the movie makes 70% of the total box office earnings. So that means that if it were to make $500 million, instead, it would make only $350 million out of that $500 million, which means that the overall profit of the film that it would need at that point, because again, if it's only $350 million, that means it's a loss of about $250 million at least, at minimum a loss of $250 million. And just to give you an idea, in order for Solo at this point to make a profit, to actually make money, it would at minimum, this is assuming that it's 70%. Let's assume that the movie's actually, that Disney is going to take 70% of the box office totals. It would have to make a minimum of $715 million in order to make any cent of profit. In order for the movie to be profitable at all, in order for Disney to be able to say, okay, we made money off of this film. Now, that is $250 million over what I think it's going to make, and I don't think anyone at this point is going to say that it's going to make over $700 million. I mean, so basically, what all of this is saying is that Solo is going to lose money, and it's going to lose at least $100 to $200 million. Now, if that doesn't speak loudly to the executives at Disney that there is something that they're doing wrong, and that it's not this fake Disney fatigue, which is just a crap thing that people are spreading around right now, but instead it's this actual anger that is existing within the fan base of just being so tired of being of a message being shoved down our throats, that hopefully this is the message that they need. Hopefully a $200 million loss, again, pretty much at least a $200 million loss, is what they will need to actually understand that we want better films and that we want this whole SJW nonsense messaging to be taken out of our films. Because again, when you look at the actual numbers themselves, and I'm going to link the articles, everything that I mentioned down below, but every single thing that you read and every single thing that you're seeing right now, there's just no way that this movie is going to make money. And if this movie does make any money, not all that money is going to go to Disney. And that's before even taking into the account of the amount of money that they spent on the overall film as well. So I just want to get this video out there because I know a lot of people mentioned that and try to make the point saying that they wouldn't be making all of the money at the box office. And that's absolutely true. So again, at 70% of a take, which is being extremely generous, let's just assume that Disney is going to take 70% of the total box office. It would need to make $715 million at least to break even. Now, again, that should scream terror for what's going on right now with the total box office, because at this moment, the estimate for the 4-day holiday weekend is a worldwide total of $168 million, which means that it is at this point only made $117 million of that number. Again, assuming a 70% take on that. So, guys, thank you so much for watching this. If you liked what you heard, please give me a thumbs up. Give me a subscribe as well. If you want to hear more about box office numbers or more about statistics, please let me know. I hate doing it, but if that's something that you want to see, please let me know that. And also, if you disagree or you have different numbers, please share that down below as well. I'd love to have that conversation with you guys. So have a great day. Have a great Memorial Day. And as always, God bless.